Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and I am so excited to be celebrating 10 years of meaningful conversations with you. As we step into our new primetime hour, it's such an honor to share this exciting new chapter with you. So whether you're starting your day out, headed to work, or listening from wherever you are, this hour is designed to bring you thoughtful dialogue, fresh insight, and inspiring stories so you can make every moment count. So thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive in. We're here today with special guest Nicole Sachs, who's here to share with us her new book, Mind Your Body, a revolutionary program to release chronic pain and anxiety. What if your body isn't broken, but trying to tell you something? Do you know how to listen to it? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Nicole Sachs is a psychotherapist, best-selling author, speaker, podcaster, and internationally recognized leader in mind-body medicine. She's the creator of Journal Speak, a groundbreaking practice that has helped transform the lives of thousands struggling with chronic pain, anxiety, and other conditions. So welcome to the show, Nicole Sachs.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my goodness, what a great honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. What inspired you to write this?
Well, I come by this very honestly. I started mind-body medicine as a patient. When I was 19, my back went out completely. I had to come home from college and go through all the tests and the MRIs and the x-rays. And the orthopedic surgeon at the time, now granted this was 1990, but did say that because there was a finding, which is called degenerative spondylolisthesis, big mouthful, that I had a very serious spinal condition and it would limit me for life. No more exercise, no more travel, be very careful about the way you sleep, how long you ride in a bumpy car. And the kicker was the likelihood that I would have a biological child was slim to none because my back was so disordered and it could be a really catastrophic situation to put that kind of pressure on it. And so that was 19 years old. So you can only imagine that was a pretty heavy thing to hear at that age. And I basically went through my life sort of living in fear. I took enough steroids and muscle relaxers to move me from acute pain to chronic pain, but I always had a terribly bad back. And when I landed in graduate school, I was studying to be a psychotherapist. I came upon the work of Dr. John Sarno, which some of your listeners may have heard of him. He was what I like to call the grandfather of mind-body medicine. He was for 50 years a attending physician at the Rusk Center for Rehabilitation at NYU Medical Center. And he was doing work around the neuroscience behind chronic pain. We might all have abnormalities. We have different reasons that account for our symptoms, but he kind of broadened the lens to say, let's see if there is a reason why the brain and the nervous system are sending these pain signals, and maybe it's not just because of the structural abnormality. And, as a psychology student, as a person who was curious, a bit of a seeker, that really interested me. And I started studying mind-body medicine, understanding it. Throughout my story, I actually end up meeting with Dr. Sarno in person. And I started understanding the brain science behind how the human body functions. And through my understanding and creating tools as I went, which is why you find me where I am today, I relieved my back pain completely and have worked for the past 25 years, guiding people all around the world through symptoms like migraines, fibromyalgia, long COVID, neck, back, shoulder, knee, hip, elbow kind of pain, stomach disorders, IBS. The list goes on. And I had 3 children. I exercised till the day they were born. They're 23, 21, and 18 now. And I've had no back pain. And, it might sound really kind of crazy when people first hear it, but it's pretty phenomenal and fascinating when you start looking more deeply at the way the body functions and how when we're stuck in long-term fight or flight, what that can do to to our muscle systems and our nerves and inflammation. And so basically, and now I wrote this book. It came out last year in 2025 through Penguin Random House. It was very exciting because it's 20 years of best practices from being out there helping people move through this work on their own.
And to have that firsthand experience, having walked that path, my goodness, what a profound story. Because so many people are told, "Oh, your pain is physical, and you're stuck with that for the rest of your life. You have to manage the pain." So, how does your framework kind of put that on its head?
Yeah, it's a great question because I definitely should have mentioned sooner. The pain is not in your head. The pain is physical. You are not hysterical. You're not overly sensitive. You're not making it up. And this is especially important for women to hear because we have oftentimes historically been dismissed by doctors, oh, you're just hysterical. And like, that's a real trigger point. So I want to make sure to start by saying the pain is not in your head. The pain is physical. Your muscles are constricting and spasming. Your inflammation is happening in the body. Your nerves are firing, neuropathy. These things are happening. So all the pain is physical. So the real question, and I think this is where it turns it on its head, is why? Why? The human animal is not built for long-term fight or flight. Fight or flight is short bursts, so we can figure out how to save our own lives in that moment. And what happens is modern day society is sort of an onslaught of predators, if you will. Whereas at the dawn of civilization, predators were the saber-toothed tiger or maybe the tribe next door or the long winter, and those were very real predators that our bodies had to adjust for. These days, the predator is social media. The predator is how much sleep you didn't get. The predator is your child who is being bullied at school. The predator is your boss who says, come, I have to have a conversation with you, or your mother, and she calls you at 2 a.m. The predators are everywhere, and the predators are internal as well. Your self-worth, your body image, your fear of failure. We just live in a constant onslaught that keeps us in a sustained fight or flight space. And what happens when the nervous system is that dysregulated is the brain and the nervous system start seeking a place to protect you, right? There's a predator afoot. How can you save your own life? And the way I teach when I, travel the country and I work with people or whatever I'm doing is to help them understand that this is totally normal. Even when you are struggling with incredibly intense symptoms or pain or anxiety or OCD, there's so many different ways that this materializes. Your body is actually in tip-top shape in that your nervous system thinks there's a predator and you're being protected because pain and symptoms are actually seen as protective by the human nervous system because they keep us small, attending to ourselves, canceling plans where the predators might be attacking, like your mother at family dinner. And in that way, what I like to call safe in the unsafest way, we are kept there. We are oddly in equilibrium when we are canceling plans, going from doctor to doctor, making our lives small and quote safe. And that's the cycle I seek to break.
Well, I love how your book really describes how the nervous system is playing like a central role in chronic conditions. Can you explain how that process works in simple terms?
Yes. So the best way I can explain it is, as I just said, the nervous system is hardwired to keep us alive. It's its first and primary purpose before anything else. And so we all walk through life and we have many emotional experiences. And this is why it's so important for me to start with the pain is not in your head, because the moment that emotions are discussed, people could make that assumption that I'm saying, oh, you're just really upset, you're making it up. But I want you to think of emotions as energy in motion. I want you to think of scenarios like when I could teach to a room of 1,000 people and I could say, what I am teaching you, no matter how bizarre it sounds, is something you already believe. And the way I demonstrate that is I say, raise your hand if you've ever had a stressful day or been super overwhelmed or just everything was too much and you got a headache. almost every hand in the room goes up because it's rare that a person has never gotten a stress headache. Like you didn't hit your head, you don't have a brain tumor, you're just like really overwhelmed and you have a headache. And then I say, okay, keep your hand up if you ran to the ER that night because you were sure that you were incredibly ill. And, most people laugh and they put their hands down. And I say, you see, you already believe that an emotional stimuli, stress, overwhelm, people giving you a hard time, could cause a physical reaction, a headache, and then we kind of go on to say, like, if you've ever heard of a comedian who's about to run on stage, go and throw up, you don't assume that he just got food poisoning or the stomach flu. You're like, he was really scared, right? Emotional stimulus, physical reaction. And the examples go on and on. And so once people kind of calm down and know that what I'm teaching them is not far afield from things they've understood in the past, they can start to listen, like, why then? Why am I having all these experiences that are negative because I'm having such an overflow of unfelt, often difficult emotions? And that's when I can help people understand. Like the best kind of visual I can say is imagine if you had an imagined science beaker, like a clear science beaker in between like your belly and your chest. And it was gathering throughout your life and throughout your day, all of these emotions that you're not able to feel because we can't possibly feel every single thing that occurs to us, every trigger, every hurt feeling, every stress and pressure, every fear, certainly in the world of geopolitics. Like we don't have capacity and we shouldn't because otherwise we'd be paralyzed with all of our big feelings. So they get repressed, which is, by the way, another very healthy process. However, energy is neither created nor destroyed. It is transferred from one form to another. And so when this reservoir starts to overflow and threaten to knock on the door of our totally conscious mind and tell us how stuck or scared or enraged or whatever we are, we go into fight or flight. And the nervous system immediately looks for protection. And that's why it's so confusing for people because when a big symptom comes on, sometimes it's attached to like nothing. Sometimes people say, Nicole, you're never going to believe it. I reached for a plate and I threw out my back. And it's because they're just at that tipping point where the body is seeking something to slow them down. Because if you think about it, pain by its very nature is here as an alarm. It's here, like, back in the early days of humanity, if you cut your arm and it was bleeding and it didn't hurt you, it would never occur to you to clean it or to dress it or to make sure that the predator down the street, whatever street you're on, isn't going to like smell it and eat you. We are given pain as a way to understand that we need to attend to ourselves. And so that is the process that happens. And so what I do in my practice and in my teachings is it's like a three-legged stool, and you need all three legs to stand. The first is believe, meaning education, understanding the neuroscience. As you mentioned, the whole first third of the book is really to help people know without making them skeptical or defensive, what is happening in your body? What is this dance between the brain, the nervous system, and the human body? And then the second leg of the stool, which I call do the work, is teaching people a practice that I've created called Journal Speak to get a ladle into that reservoir on a regular basis and dump it out, get it down, regulate your nervous system, feel what you need to feel. And I never know how it's going to sound for people who haven't heard it, but I will tell you, as wild as that sounds, I've been now working, like I said, about 25 years in the field. I've seen the most stunning success stories, including my own. But it's got to be at this point millions of people around the world, if you count my podcast and all the different things that are offered. And it's pretty astonishing. It's wonderful to watch.
So you mentioned this reservoir, and we've kind of gone over how the body is storing these emotions. So how can someone begin to shift from their fear, it may be of the symptoms or what they're going through, and use that in a way that will help them move out of fear so that they can start feeling some relief?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing I tell people is it is a power move to replace your fear with curiosity. You don't have to set the fear aside. The fear is coming with. If we didn't have fear, we probably all would be extinct. We need our fear to alert us to decide using our discernment whether or not something is dangerous or not. So we're not telling the fear to step aside. We're telling the fear to get into the back seat, and we're going to bring it with us. However, if you can just replace your fear with curiosity and say, I wonder, oh, Nicole, heard her on this interview. What if? I love the concept of what if. What if what she's saying could be true for me? And that's all I need. I often say, I don't need a foot in the door. I need your pinky toe in the door. I just need you to be curious. And once you're curious, then of course, I have all these different resources for you to sit down in a very loving, understanding, and welcoming space and say, let me teach you. Let me teach you how to teach yourself. Because the thing about this work is it starts oftentimes because people have symptoms. That's how they find me. And then the pain is the biggest, littlest part because they start doing the work. Their symptoms start going, and they start realizing, wow, there's this whole part of my human experience, my relationships, my way of moving through the world that I didn't really even know. And it turns out that I've interviewed hundreds of people on my podcast, and every single one of them has said the same thing. I'm serious, to the number, that they're grateful. They're grateful they went through this because they have now such a complex and rich understanding of themselves, and it's affected every relationship in their life. By the way, I didn't mention the third leg of the stool. The third leg of the stool is a self-compassion practice. And that is something I am a New Yorker, I move fast, I'm a perfectionist, and I never understood what self-compassion was. And had you mentioned it to me in my life, I'd probably been like, okay, well, that's for some people, not for me. And as I've moved through this work and I understand the voice that is dedicated to all others is not the horrible, mean, and berating voice that we keep just for ourselves. And I often say that doing this work without a self-compassion practice, which I teach as well, is like bailing out a boat with a hole in the bottom. Like, why waste your energy? Like, we need to learn to speak differently to ourselves. It actually matters. It's actually chemical the way it matters. So yes, we are retraining our brains through all three of these legs, through knowledge and understanding, which quells the fear, by the way, in itself. Because as you start understanding the workings of your human body and brain and what has been happening all along, you're less freaked out because you're not confused. So there's that. Then you start doing your journal speak practice and your meditation, all of which I teach in the book, in my courses, in my membership. So there are plenty of places to learn this. You do the journal speak, you start ladling out that reservoir, and now you start seeing your symptoms easing, coming less and less. You start paying attention to the way you talk to yourself. You understand that self-compassion is a verb. It has to be done. It has to be done. It's an inside job. And little by slowly, what happens is your neural pathways that are trained for pain, that are stuck on a loop, sending these signals of inflammation, muscle constriction, spasm, and neuropathy, they start easing and they start being retread for safety. And that is something I see every day in my work.
For those that may feel a little skeptical about this connection between the emotional cause of pain and how they're feeling, how do you help people move past that resistance?
Over the years, so it's been many years since I've been doing this. And when I first started doing it, I found that I would get only the most desperate cases, people who have been several surgeries, through so many specialists, through just the gamut. I mean, you can't imagine the things I've heard. And so their willingness was really just built on desperation. They were like, I will try anything, that kind of thing. As I've moved through the years of this work, and as I believe the collective consciousness has risen to the point where people really do understand there is a very scientific, this is not woo-woo, this is not therapy talk, a very scientific connection between mind and body, it has become easier and easier for people to step into this work. But there is a little hack. And I will say, similar to what I said about the stress and the headache or the comedian and the stomach just upset, I say to people who struggle to believe, I say, first of all, what if, right? What if your life could be so much richer and better and more joyful, and if you could have more presence? I mean, I don't know many people who would just throw that away. So I start there, and then I say, think about the last time you either went through a breakup, or you got terrible news, Or alternatively, you were super, super excited, like 10 out of 10 anticipating something. What happened in your stomach? Now, most people have had the experience of either losing their appetite or having some sort of stomach distress, even if you want to just call it butterflies. All this is a physical reaction, a very physical reaction when it comes to appetite from an emotional stimulus. Like, people need to understand, whether you believe it or not, it happens in your body every single day. And so when people can kind of calm down and realize that nothing I'm saying is anything different than what's already part of their human functioning, they're able to widen their lens a bit and say, but oh, what if this is also the reason for my migraines? What if this is also my fibromyalgia or my chronic fatigue or my, whatever. I mean, there's so many things. And that is my in, because I just hold people with a ton of love and compassion. I have been there. I am them. I get it. And I help them do this work for themselves.
Well, they often say you can't take people where you haven't been. And so I think your story is so profound, just because you've learned so much, you've encountered so much, and you've been able to overcome so much as well. What is one of the number one misconceptions that you get from people?
I mean, it's just got to be that I'm saying the pain is in their head. It's what Dr. Sarno came upon as well. It is, and I have such compassion for that. I get it. If you are suffering, if you've been through years, if you've had specialist after doctor after specialist say, either we've done as much as we can do for you, or we see nothing on your tests, or yeah, we have a diagnosis, but there's no cure. Like, that's a really low place. And so I just have a ton of empathy for the first reaction people having as being, defensive. What are you saying? I'm upset. And so I'm, disabled. And that's why I continually just meet that with like compassion. I know it sounds really trite and kind of like nothing to be like, I meet something with love, but actually kind of that's what we need to ease into anything difficult, that someone sees you, receives you, understands you. I am not offended by people's being offended by me. I just sit there and I'm like, I get it. I completely get it. And this is happening. It is not in your head. It is a result of brain function and nervous system dysregulation, yes, but that doesn't mean you're making it up. It simply means that everything we feel originates in the brain and the nervous system. And that's one last thing I'll say that does help people, to help them understand that we think we feel like sensations in our hands, let's say, but you don't really feel it in your hand. What happens when you touch a hot stove is that the nerves in your finger send a message to your brain, and that message is the sensory environment has changed. Now, it's up to the brain and your perception to understand whether or not that sensory environment is changed for the positive or for the negative, right? Are you burning your finger, or have you touched something delightful? Once it is, and this is all happening in a split moment, okay? This is all happening immediately and reflexively. The message is sent down, no, this is something where you need to react, you need to get away. It's a predator, it can burn you, move your hand. And all of this happens in the blink of an eye. But the only reason you feel it is because the brain has sent a message that it's time to feel it. And so it's nothing that I teach goes against anything that people believe. It's just, when you're scared and when you're angry and when you're frustrated and when you feel hopeless, sometimes people can default into that, Nicole, you're saying the pain is in my head. And I'm always like, oh, honey, I am not. But I am saying that you have so much more power than you realize to affect your physical and emotional health. And I want to help you.
Oh, what a profound way of looking at life. And you mentioned journal speak. How is that different than just journaling?
Yeah, that's a big question. Thank you for asking. So when I first was recovering from the worst of my chronic pain, I understood that one of the best ways, and everyone talks about this, many people talk about this, to understand yourself is to journal, because when you have to slow down long enough to write anything down, whether you type or you write longhand, you are making space for epiphany. You're making space to understand yourself. You're laying it out in front of you. And so when I was trying to, uncover my emotions and get into my reservoir and dump it out, I was told by Dr. Sarno, try journaling. And I was trying it. And it was like, sure, it was great, I guess. But like, it felt like I was getting to a whole lot of nothing. I was like playing my tapes, you know? I know my father was overly critical and I know my childhood was this or that, you know, and I was doing it. And what happened to me, in a moment of real, I guess, desperation and willingness, those two are a very good pair, is I wrote a line on the paper that I was very, very surprised to have written. And the line was, I hate being a mother. And it was a very bizarre line because you have to realize that I never thought I would have children. And then I originally found some relief from my back pain just by reading Dr. Sarno's book in the 90s. And I, you know, had my 2 out of my 3 children. And when I had 2 kids, my back went out again and worse than ever. And I was in a shame spiral because not only was I in terrible physical pain, but I thought it was all my fault because the doctors had told me, you know, you shouldn't have children. And it was just a very, very low time. And it went on for about a year. And so when I finally made it into Dr. Sarno's office, I never thought that the problem was inside of me. I thought the problem was with my back. I have a physical problem. When I started journaling and I wrote this first line of journal speak ever penned, I hate being a mother. And I stared at it like it was anathema. I could not believe that I would even think it. But instead of meeting it with resistance or shaming myself, I just got curious and I was like, what is in there? And I started really writing with reckless abandon, as if it's a 5-year-old who wants a cookie before dinner. Like, this is what I'm doing and I'm failing and I thought it was going to be this and it's that and I wasn't expecting it to be this way. And I just ranted like a tantrum. And it went from parenting to my parents and what they had done. And then it went into self-loathing and what are you so weak that you can't do this? It was so unbridled and it felt really ugly. But I didn't care. I was like, hey, listen, man, I'm here to save my own life. If this is what's in there, let's get it out. And what was really fascinating is I landed at this place that I never, ever could have found if you had my hand on a stack of Bibles or a lie detector test on me. I couldn't have known this. After all this journaling, and by the way, wasn't all this, it was in the course of one afternoon, that when I was about 11 or 12 years old, I made this very sacred promise to myself. And it was very sweet. And I never would have remembered it. But it basically was, my parents were messing things up. And that was what was going on in my life. And one day I was going to be the mother. One day I was going to be the matriarch. And I would have children. And not only would I be perfect and everything would be perfect, and everyone who's a parent is laughing because you should be, but also it was going to heal the wounds of my childhood. It was going to go back and take that little girl out of her bed who's crying, who's listening to her parents fight or whatever, and make it right for her. And it was so sweet and it was so unexpected. And I realized that the reason I thought I hated it, which by the way, journal speak does not stay true. You just have to let it ride out. Is that because I felt like I was failing at it all the time because I wasn't able to rescue her. And it was very sweet and it was very lovely because, you know, 2 toddlers is not the recipe for rescuing yourself from anything. However, when I got there and I understood what was really going on, first of all, I was flooded with love for my children and parenting. And I will tell you, I have never parented through the lens of my own childhood, you know, trauma. Like I have, because of this, have parented my 3 children exactly as who they are. And it has created 3 relationships in my life that are beyond words. But it also completely relieved me of my pain because what I was holding in there, what was keeping my nervous system in fight or flight every day was an unconscious broken promise to myself. And I didn't know. And that's what I started to journal speak. I was like, this isn't journaling. This is something else. And I don't know why I called it journal speak. This was many years ago. And I started allowing that kind of rubric for everything in my life. And I would do it. And then I would throw it away. I was like, this is like blowing your nose in a tissue. This isn't something you need to hold on to. This is just an exercise to bring the unconscious conscious. You know, Carl Jung said, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and we will call it fate. And that is what's happening in your body, but it's happening physically. And so I teach people properly and safely to get to what they need to get to.
My goodness, what a profound journey you've been on, Nicole. Thank you for sharing that with us. I love your book, Mind Your Body. I felt like it was such a profound read. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
Well, the easiest way to get all things me is to just go to NicoleSachs.com, NicoleSachs.com. And there you can link to many things. So it links to my book, which, by the way, you can get anywhere you buy your books, or I'm happy to read it to you on any audio platform. And we have a membership tab. I meet with our members, global membership, 2 to 3 times a month, and they ask me their questions. So there's that. It's called Heal with Nicole. We have one-on-one coaching. I supervise. We have a very, very robust team of coaches that is working one-on-one with people under the coaching tab. I do retreats. I will be teaching one at the Omega Institute at the end of June, which is in New York, and one at Miraval in Austin, Texas in September. That's also linked. And then I have a podcast, The Cure for Chronic Pain, hundreds of episodes that you can just start from the beginning and find yourself in every story. It is the privilege of a lifetime to be able to bring this work to people around the world, and you can find it all where I am.
Well, Nicole, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
It's been a total pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, Nicole. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Mind Your Body. Make sure to visit Nicole's website at NicoleSachs.com, learn more about her work, and be part of her community. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.